Welcome back, coin hunters and collectors. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of the Liberty Wheat Penny, the classic 1-cent coin that has captured the imagination of collectors for generations. These small copper coins may look ordinary at first glance, but some dates, mint marks, varieties, and unusual minting errors can make a wheat penny especially interesting to collectors. So before you spend or dismiss that old penny, take a closer look. Because the coin sitting quietly in an old collection, jar, drawer, or pocket could have a story worth discovering. Stay with us as we explore what makes wheat pennies special, what details you should look for, and why condition and rarity can make such a dramatic difference in collector interest. The 1941 Liberty Wheat Penny 1-cent coin may look like a simple old copper cent, but hold one under the light, and you are looking at a small piece of American history, struck during a remarkable period when the country was moving toward the turmoil of World War II. Produced as part of the Lincoln Cent series featuring Victor David Brenner's famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the two wheat ears on the reverse, the 1941 cent was made primarily from a bronze alloy and carries the familiar warm brown, reddish-brown, or coppery appearance that collectors immediately recognize. Yet the date alone does not make every 1941 penny valuable. The real excitement begins when you ask a different question. What exactly is hiding inside the details of this particular coin? A sharply struck example, an unusually preserved specimen, a legitimate mint error, or a rare variety can transform an ordinary-looking cent into a much more interesting collector piece. That is why the 1941 date deserves a closer examination, because sometimes the difference between a coin worth very little and a coin that attracts serious attention is not obvious at first glance. To understand why collectors are drawn to the 1941 wheat penny, you have to imagine the world in which it was made. America was entering one of the most consequential periods in its history, and millions of these small cents were being produced for everyday commerce. Every coin carried Lincoln's image, while the reverse wheat design had already become one of the most recognizable symbols of American coinage. Today, decades later, that ordinary purpose is exactly what makes surviving pieces fascinating. Most 1941 cents experienced years of circulation, passing through cash registers, pockets, drawers, and jars before eventually disappearing into collections. Look closely at the highest points of Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and coat. Then turn the coin over and study the wheat ears, lettering, and central details. Where should normally appear naturally across the design rather than looking artificially smoothed? Original color, surface quality, and sharpness can all influence collector interest, while harsh cleaning can reduce appeal even when the coin appears bright. And that is where the story gets interesting, because a coin that seems ordinary from several feet away can reveal an entirely different personality under magnification. Now comes the detective work, and this is where you should resist the temptation to assume that every unusual mark is a valuable error. Start with the date and mint mark if present and examine the area around the lettering carefully. Look for genuine signs of double design elements, unusual spacing, die cracks, repunched features, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or other mint-made abnormalities. A true mint error generally has characteristics consistent with the manufacturing process, rather than random damage caused after the coin entered circulation. Pay special attention to the rim. An authentic striking problem may affect the shape or completeness of the rim in a way that ordinary wear or damage does not. Strike alignment also matters. If the design appears dramatically shifted or incomplete, document exactly what you see rather than immediately assigning a price. Even the metal color deserves careful attention. A 1941 cent with a normal brown or reddish-brown appearance is one thing, while a suspiciously bright, silver-colored or dramatically different-looking example requires much more investigation. If something seems unusual, do not polish it, scrape it, bend it, or attempt a homemade cleaning experiment. The original surface is part of the coin's evidence. Then comes one of the simplest tests that can separate excitement from reality: weight. A standard 1941 bronze Lincoln cent should be around its expected original weight, but circulation, corrosion, damage, or environmental exposure can alter a coin slightly. A major weight difference, however, can be a reason to investigate further. Use a precise digital scale capable of measuring to at least hundredths of a gram, and compare the result with reliable numismatic references. Weight should never be used alone to declare a coin rare, because dirt, damage, altered surfaces, or manufacturing tolerances can create misleading clues. Examine the coin's diameter, thickness, edge, rim, and overall strike as a complete group of evidence. Then compare the suspected feature with photographs of confirmed examples rather than relying on a random online listing. This is especially important when examining alleged doubled lettering. Machine doubling, die deterioration, scratches, and postment damage can create shapes that look dramatic under magnification but have little added collector value. The goal is not simply to find something strange. The goal is to determine whether the strange feature was created at the mint and whether collectors actually recognize it as significant. And now we reach the question that makes people lean closer to the screen. What could a special 1941 wheat penny potentially be worth? The answer depends enormously on condition, authenticity, rarity, eye appeal, and the exact nature of any error or variety. As an illustrative storytelling ladder, a minor but interesting variation might be discussed in a hypothetical $2,500 to $3,500 range, while a much more notable and authenticated example could be imagined around $9,000. A high-grade coin might be discussed around $5,000, an unusual mint anomaly around $6,000, and a rare collector piece around $7,500. An exceptionally preserved or uncommon specimen could be considered around $8,000 in this illustrative scenario, while an unusual discovery with strong collector demand might reach an illustrative $8,500 level, with an extraordinary or historically significant example potentially approaching $9,000. These figures are storytelling examples, not guaranteed prices, and they should never be mistaken for a valuation of every 1941 penny. Real auction results can be dramatically lower or higher depending on authentication, grading, market demand, provenance, and the precise variety or error involved. A coin worth thousands on paper is not the same thing as a coin that will automatically sell for thousands. That distinction becomes incredibly important because the emotional power of a discovery can make people see dollar signs before they see evidence. Imagine finding an old 1941 cent in a forgotten box and wondering whether it could become something resembling a down payment on a home, a sudden windfall, or even a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. That feeling is exciting, but responsible collecting means slowing down. Photograph both sides under good lighting. Record the weight without damaging the coin. Examine the rim and edge. Check the strike alignment. Study the lettering and numbers under magnification. Compare the surfaces with known examples. And if the coin continues to show convincing evidence of a significant error or exceptional grade, seek an experienced numismatist or reputable professional grading and authentication service. Professional authentication can determine whether an apparent mint error is genuine, whether the coin has been altered, and how its condition compares with other surviving examples. This step can be especially valuable when substantial money is involved, because a spectacular-looking coin with no credible authentication may attract far less serious interest than a properly documented specimen. There is also something deeply appealing about the 1941 wheat penny because its value story is not only about money, it is about survival. Think about how many millions of coins entered circulation and how many were eventually worn down, damaged, discarded, or lost forever. The one sitting in your hand survived all those years. Maybe it spent decades in an old collection. Maybe it rested unnoticed in a jar, or maybe it traveled through countless transactions before someone finally stopped and looked closely. That is the magic of old coin hunting. Rarity is sometimes invisible until somebody takes the time to investigate. But remember, an ordinary 1941 cent is still an ordinary cent unless its condition, variety, or era gives collectors a legitimate reason to value it more highly. The thrill comes from proving the difference. Every unusual mark becomes a question, every unusual measurement becomes a clue, and every confirmed characteristic brings you one step closer to knowing what you actually have. So before you toss another old penny into a jar or spend it without a second thought, take one final look at the 1941 wheat penny. Check the date, study the color, inspect the rim, measure the weight, examine the strike alignment, and carefully search the lettering for genuine doubling or other unusual mint characteristics. Most importantly, remember that the biggest treasures are not created by wishful thinking. They are discovered through evidence, patience, comparison, and professional authentication when necessary. The 1941 cent may have been designed to buy something ordinary, but more than 8 decades later, a truly unusual survivor can tell a story far larger than its 1 cent face value. And just when you think you have seen every possible secret hiding inside an old penny, another coin can appear with an even stranger combination of rarity, condition, and minting history. The question is not whether valuable coins can hide in everyday places. It is whether the next one you pick up will be the coin that changes everything. The 1942 Liberty Wheat Penny, a humble 1 cent coin from a nation already deep in the turmoil of World War II, can look almost ordinary at first glance. Yet this small copper piece carries a remarkable story of American history, wartime production, and the countless hands through which it traveled. Struck with the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and 2 wheat stalks, framing the words 1 cent, and United States of America on the reverse. The 1942 wheat cent belongs to the final years of the classic bronze wheat penny era, before the composition changes of 1943 transformed the appearance of the cent. Look closely, and you begin to notice the details that make old coins fascinating. The sharpness of Lincoln's hair and cheek, the definition around liberty, the strength of the wheat ears, and the surviving original reddish-brown color that can separate a well-preserved example from one that spent decades exposed to moisture, dirt, and circulation. Millions were struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, so the date alone does not make every 1942 cent rare. But that is precisely where the mystery begins, because collectors are not simply hunting for an old coin. They are searching for the right combination of date, mint mark, condition, strike quality, surface preservation, and genuine mint-made abnormalities. The 1942 cent emerged during a fascinating moment in American minting history, when the nation was adapting nearly every aspect of manufacturing to wartime demands. Copper was strategically important, and the following year the mint would move to a temporary steel composition for Lincoln cents, making 1942 part of a symbolic bridge between the familiar bronze cents of the pre-war era and the unusual steel cents of 1943. On a normal 1942 example, the coin should have the expected bronze appearance, although decades of oxidation can turn the surface brown, darken it, or create uneven shades that tell their own story. The mint mark, when present, appears beneath the date on the obverse, identifying Denver or San Francisco production, while Philadelphia cents carry no mint mark. That tiny letter can dramatically change how collectors approach the coin, because mintage totals, survival estimates, condition rarity, and demand vary among issues. And then there is the question of errors. Genuine doubled dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, striking abnormalities, and other recognized mint errors can attract serious attention. But a worn coin with flattened lettering or damage from machinery is not automatically an error. The difference between a fascinating mint-made mistake and ordinary damage is often subtle, which is why the closer you look, the more important careful examination becomes. Imagine finding one of these coins in a jar that has sat untouched for decades, perhaps mixed among ordinary change that nobody bothered to inspect. You turn it under a lamp, and the date 1942 suddenly appears, followed by a mint mark you had never noticed before. For a moment, that tiny cent feels less like pocket change and more like a message from another era. But resist the temptation to declare it a fortune immediately. Start with the basics. A standard 1942 bronze cent should have the expected weight of about 3.11 grams when properly measured on a precise scale, while a meaningful weight difference could signal something worth investigating. But it could also result from wear, corrosion, damage, or inaccurate equipment. Examine the metal color under neutral lighting rather than relying on a photograph, because artificial lighting can exaggerate reddish or golden tones. Inspect the rim from edge to edge for unusual flattening, missing metal, or an irregular shape, and compare the strike alignment by viewing both sides carefully. If the letters appear doubled, don't assume that every blurry or shadow-like appearance is a doubled die. Mechanical doubling, die wear, circulation damage, and photography can create misleading effects. The goal is not to convince yourself that the coin is rare, but to eliminate ordinary explanations until only a genuine possibility remains. And this is where the value story becomes especially exciting, because rarity and condition can transform the conversation. A circulated 1942 wheat penny with an interesting but minor variation might, in an illustrative collector market scenario, fall somewhere around the $2,500 to $3,500 level if it possesses the right authenticated characteristics, while a significantly more notable example could potentially reach around $9,000. A high-grade specimen might be discussed around $5,000 in a hypothetical value ladder, while an unusual and properly documented mint anomaly could move towards $6,000. Rare collector pieces might enter the $7,500 range. Exceptionally preserved or uncommon examples could approach $8,000, and unusual discoveries backed by strong collector demand might be imagined around $8,500, with extraordinary or historically significant examples reaching as much as $9,000 in this illustrative ladder. These figures are storytelling examples, not guarantees or fixed price guides, and actual prices can be dramatically different depending on authentication, grade, eye appeal, provenance, rarity, auction demand, and the exact variety or error involved. A coin worth several $1,000s could feel like a down payment on a home, a sudden windfall arriving from the bottom of a forgotten drawer, or the kind of once-in-a-lifetime discovery that makes a collector remember the exact moment forever. But the excitement should always come after evidence, not before it. There is another reason the 1942 wheat penny can capture the imagination. Condition becomes increasingly important as ordinary examples become more plentiful than truly exceptional survivors. Think about the journey a single cent may have taken after leaving the mint. It could have entered circulation during wartime, passed through a grocery store, been dropped onto a sidewalk, tucked into a child's collection, forgotten inside a wooden box, and eventually resurfaced generations later. Every scratch, stain, fingerprint, cleaning mark, and contact impression becomes part of that journey, but collectors generally reward original surfaces and strong preservation. A coin with vibrant original red color can be especially desirable when that color is natural and accompanied by excellent detail, while a harshly cleaned coin may lose appeal even if it looks bright. Pay particular attention to Lincoln's portrait, the fields surrounding the lettering, the wheat stalks, and the rim. A strong strike can preserve details that a weakly struck coin loses, and tiny differences can become surprisingly important at higher grades. This is why two 1942 cents that appear nearly identical to a casual observer can have completely different collector appeal once examined under magnification and proper lighting. Then comes the most dangerous part of the hunt, believing that every unusual-looking feature is valuable. A dark spot might be environmental damage, not an error. A strange rim might have been created after the coin left the mint. A missing section of lettering could result from wear rather than a striking problem. Even apparent doubling needs careful study under magnification, especially around the date and inscriptions. If you discover a coin that appears genuinely unusual, avoid polishing it, scratching the surface, attempting to straighten it, or cleaning it with chemicals. Those actions can permanently reduce its numismatic value and destroy evidence that an expert needs to examine. Instead, photograph both sides, record the coin's weight with a reliable scale, note the diameter if you have accurate measuring equipment, and compare the strike, rim, lettering, and mint mark with a known normal 1942 cent. Most importantly, consider professional authentication from a respected numismatic grading or authentication service when the potential value justifies the expense. A dramatic claim on social media is not proof. A documented attribution and professional evaluation carry far more weight when real money is involved. The emotional power of the 1942 Liberty Wheat Penny comes from this strange contrast between appearance and possibility. It is a tiny bronze disc that could have been worth only a cent when it entered circulation. Yet today the right example can become a serious collector's prize, because time has filtered millions of coins down to a smaller population of remarkable survivors. The key word is right. The right condition, the right variety, the right mint-made error, the right surfaces, and the right authentication. That's why the most exciting moment is not necessarily seeing the highest possible price attached to a coin online. It is realizing that something you almost ignored deserves a second look. Perhaps your example has unusually strong detail, an authentic mint anomaly, an uncommon combination of characteristics, or preservation far above what you expected. Perhaps it turns out to be completely ordinary. Either way, the examination teaches you how to see history differently. The 1942 cent reminds us that value is not always visible at first glance, and that patience, research, and disciplined observation can be more powerful than excitement. So before you toss another old penny into a jar, stop for a second and look at the date, the mint mark, the metal, the rim, the alignment, and the smallest letters under magnification, because the next coin you examine could contain a detail you have never noticed before. The 1942 Wheat Penny may have been born in an era when America was preparing for an uncertain future, but its journey did not end when it left the mint. It continued through decades of circulation until, perhaps, it reached your hands. And somewhere out there among inherited collections, forgotten drawers, old coin jars, estate boxes, and ordinary pocket change, another seemingly insignificant cent may be waiting to surprise its finder. The real question is not whether every 1942 penny is worth thousands. It absolutely is not. But whether you will recognize the extraordinary one if it appears in front of you. Because once you understand how much information can hide in a date, a mint mark, a rim, a weight, and a few carefully examined letters, every old coin starts to feel like a mystery. And just when you think the hunt is over, the next shocking coin could be sitting somewhere even more ordinary, waiting for someone curious enough to turn it over.